My name is Tamara Thompson. I have the pleasure of introducing our last keynote speaker this evening. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you to the PSL team for putting on such an amazing program. Kudos to you. I've already learned so much today from every speaker and from every panelist that was up here. This time last year, Founder Factory was sort of my personal first dive into the startup ecosystem in Philadelphia. And so I sort of hold this event near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure will into the future. So thank you to the speakers and the panelists, and then again, the PSL team for acknowledging the importance of that information sharing, and the sharing of the wealth of knowledge that's in this room today. So thank you so much. So again, I'm Tamara Thompson. Some of you in this room might know me as the Director of Startup Engagement for Benjamin's Desk. So for the past 10 months, I've been really taking a deeper dive with the founders in the startup ecosystem to figure out what their needs were, what their pain points were, how we could utilize our larger network and our resources to provide communities of value for them. And that's not only within network, that's for the greater good of the larger ecosystem as well. And so about 2 months ago, I'm not sure, most of you have probably heard, Benjamin's Desk formally merged with 1776 Global Incubator based in Washington, D.C. So I now have the pleasure of working with founders from not only Philadelphia, but D.C. and New York as well. And so now the formalities of those titles are out of the way, I can get rid of this paper. And I really just want you to know the crux of what I do is building relationships, right? So of course there's some data and metrics involved in being able to predict trends in founder need and being able to identify what metrics they aren't meeting that would help us to create programming that really drives value and meets that direct need. But at the heart of all of that is actually the relationships that are built within the organization. So that's relationships with founders, figuring out and having those one-on-one conversations about what it is that they're working on, what their company is, what their goals are in the next quarter, and how we can then utilize our resources to be able to help meet pain points or be able to connect dots with them. So building relationships with mentors, figuring out what are their areas of expertise, what experiences and knowledge would they like to share with those founders to help drive value in making those connections as well. And then stakeholders and organizations like PSL, corporate partners like Comcast, and being able to figure out, okay, what are we as an ecosystem really doing that is driving value? What is PSL putting out? What is Comcast doing, like Lyft Labs? And how can we then shuffle founders in the right direction that really helps accelerate that growth. So relationship building, community building is a huge part of what I do, both with Benjamin's Desk and now with 1776. And so when I found out that I had the pleasure of introducing the next speaker, Kristen Swanson, who's the Director of Learning at Slack, my first thought was, what's a Director of Learning? And my second thought was, wow, someone who is able to apply a different type of approach to learning within an organization like Slack, right, that is creating cutting-edge ways for us to be able to engage with one another, and that I personally use to not only build communities, but also to be able to information share across our network now that we're so widely spread. So I started reading some blog posts and some information around her philosophies or theories or approaches to implementing learning within organizations. And the one that I found most intriguing was a message of, instead of approaching learning within Slack, of asking the question, how do we get someone to do X, Y, or Z, or how do we get our customer to X, Y, or Z, they instead approach that, that learning and ask the question, how do we create systems, how do we create processes that set the most people up for the most success? And I thought, wow, and this was like 2 minutes into the article, and I thought, wow, this is so relevant, and it's so relevant on so many levels, especially in this ecosystem. When I program, instead of asking, how do I get people to attend this event or this class or this workshop, I should be asking, how do I present this program, or how do I drive value in this program that presents the best information that the most people who do attend walk away feeling confident that they'll experience the most success. When you release your app, right, is your end goal, how do I get 3,000 users? We learned from Rand earlier that when you're putting out your first MVP, if you get 3,000 users or 3,000 downloads, it doesn't matter at the end of the day if 3,000 people downloaded, it's crap and you've lost all of your credibility. So instead of asking, how do I get 3,000 downloads, maybe ask, how do I set people up for the most success to utilize that app once I've actually released. And then when pitching a customer, sure, you're thinking, how do I get them to be a customer, but also how are you conveying your message that allows them to understand that your product or your service is going to be the best thing that will set the most of their customers up for the most success. So super relevant across the board, and if I could learn that much from just one blog post, I'm super, super excited to hear more about how Kristen approaches learning. So without further ado, Kristen is a lifelong educator that cares deeply about building human learning experiences. She's the founder of EdCamp Movement and the director of learning at Slack, and I'm extremely excited to bring her up to the stage. So.
Thank you so much. All right. I think we have a clicker here as well. Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. You have made it. We are 30 minutes from the end of this journey. And in my 30 minutes, I am optimistic that hopefully I will leave you with a few actionable takeaways, but I am certain that I will leave you with happy hour. So you will get something good at the end of this journey, no matter what. As that was so kindly shared, my name's Dr. Kristen Swanson, and I head up learning and development at Slack. I've been at Slack for about 2 years. How many Slack users here? Wow, okay, anybody on Slack right now? Oh my gosh, amazing. Yes, as was stated earlier, we actually have a problem with having a very addictive app, to the point where we released a D&D feature a while back that was very noted because it kind of flies in the face of making your app addictive, because we found out that people were on it more than 10 hours a day, and we started to get really worried about that. But that's not what we are here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is one of the most important things you can do as a founder as you build your team. And that is, you can build a learning culture into your organization that will make sure, regardless of your strategy or your product or all of those other pieces that you have so carefully put into place, your team is well positioned to execute on it. So first, before we start, a bit of a disclaimer here. I'm going to share a lot of things that I've learned over the last 5 years working in startups in Silicon Valley. I'm going to share a little bit of organizational research, but long before I was here, this is our headquarters in San Francisco, I was here, actually in the Philadelphia region. So I'm a Philadelphia native, and I was teaching in the Philadelphia region and being a school leader there. So much of what I say comes from not a traditional study of the HR profession, but instead a very rigorous study of learning design and human motivation design. And I think there's one thing that is critically important here. You are asking every single person in your organization to solve complex creative problems. And when complex creative problems are at the heart of what you're trying to do, having a learning culture and having a culture where people feel safe is possibly the biggest secret weapon you can instill within your organization. So I actually believe in my last 5 years, both working at Slack and other startups, that the second a startup stops learning, it actually starts dying. And we've heard lots of other reasons startups might die today. We're going to leave those for another chat. But we're going to really talk today about some practical, tactical strategies you can use to start building that healthy, safe learning culture within your environment so that you can achieve those outcomes that you want, both for your customers and for your business. When I started at Slack about 2 years ago, we were 150 people. We are now almost 1,100 people. So if you do the math, that means that approximately 71 new people start every month. That is an insane amount of people to onboard. For the first year and a half, I was the staff of one, onboarding all of those people. And so I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of cultural change. And I've also seen a lot of lessons learned that I would like to pass on to all of you, because there's no sense in making the same mistake twice. So I think there are actually 3 really threaded loops here when you start to do this. The first is making it a priority in your organization to clearly and explicitly define how we work together. The second is to instill a curiosity of what customers need. And the third is to figure out natural inflection points for implementing change. These three things build off of each other and hopefully will create an environment where people are excited to come to work and do their best work every day. So the first piece, how we work together. This is probably the stage that many of you as founders are at. It's when you start thinking really, really carefully about the people you want to add to your team, what those interactions will look like, and how to broaden your experience to that of your team. Because as a founder, you probably started as a team of one. You knew everything. It was very easy to work with yourself, right? And then as your team starts to grow, you can start to think about very common strategies. So this is a photo from the first startup I ever worked at. I joined that startup when it was 5 people and saw it through until it was about 175 people. It's still in existence today. And this was 1 year after I joined. We had about 50 people in the company at that time, and you can see that we all fit on the bus to go to the offsite that day. And this is when you're still really at that single team phase. And this is when it is imminently critical to define how you work together as a team. And you might think, Kristen, I'm busy. I don't have time for that. We have to close a round, we need to get this marketing campaign out the door, our product is buggy and we've got to fix it before it ships. And what I am going to tell you is that you will either pay now or pay 10 times later. I've paid 10 times later, don't do it, it's not fun. And one of the things that we do, especially when a group is at this direct single team phase, is we write a user manual. A user manual for yourself. And that user manual should explain to other people how you work. And you might be thinking, that is weird and crazy. And what I am telling you is I have gotten so much feedback over the years when people come to me and they go, reading that about you was the most important thing that happened in our relationship because I understood how to give you feedback. Or I understood how you were going to interact with me or what you were looking for on that project. And one of the things we heard earlier is that unpredictability is that thing that builds that habit that keeps us coming back. But the last thing you want in your relationships with your teammates is unpredictability. You want to be that person that when someone walks in your door, they know what they're going to get and why they're going to get it. And that is going to create that environment where people are excited to pitch new ideas and take some risks. I will share these slides. There is a link if you want to copy this and look at some different formats to use with your team. What we do is we actually have a Slack channel, and when everyone on our team joins, they do this, they share it in the Slack channel, and when they come to our first team meeting, we actually give them an opportunity to share a little bit about it, and we all share a little bit as well, but there's sort of a whole repository there that people can search through. This works great for defining how you work when you're a single team. But there's usually this really interesting inflection point where you move away from just being that single team. So here's a photo from my very first week at Slack. I joined in 2015, Halloween week. Side note, never join a company the week of Halloween that is rapidly growing. As if you thought it was going to be hard enough to figure out who everyone is, all of a sudden they start wearing costumes, and it's just, it is not a good thing. So we do something in our company called Halloween. Our CTO's name is Cal. He literally wears the same thing every day, which is khaki shorts, plaid shirt, and flip-flops. And so every year, either a day before Halloween or a day after Halloween, or one year we did it in November to really throw him off, we actually all dress up like Cal, and he just hates it, and he kind of goes around and grumbles all day, and it's really, really good fun, and we call it Halloween. I remember seeing this photo my first week of work and going to my boss and going, "Boss, we've got a problem." And she goes, "What? Is somebody not wearing the right color khaki?" And I said, no, we've got a real problem. We're about to move from a single team to a team of teams. And she goes, "What are you talking about? We're fine. Everybody knows everybody. Like, this is fine. It's fine." And I said, no, we are about to hit that tipping point. And one of the things that is really important for you to know as a rapidly scaling organization is there will become a natural inflection point to move from a team to a team of teams. And if you are in the team, it's very hard for you to notice it. But one clue that you can use to help you determine when this single team truly becomes a team of teams is something called Dunbar's Number. So I see a lot of heads nodding. You're probably familiar with this. Robin Dunbar was a researcher who actually studied how many people we can hold in our brain and how many people we can maintain stable relationships with. So this is the number of people at work who know to come up to me as a Philly native and ask me how Wentz is doing. This is the number of people who know at work how I like my coffee or what kind of treat I prefer for my birthday. It's funfetti cake. And this is the number of people who probably can remember, if I told them what I was doing over the weekend, to ask how it went. And once you start to exceed this number, regardless of where your company is in its trajectory, you're going to cross that threshold from a single team to a team of teams. And when you hit that threshold, all of these strategies about being explicit and talking about how you work have to change. And the reason they have to change is because you can't have that many relationships to build the trust required for psychological safety. We already heard today some of the research that Google had published in the Times from one of their studies called Project Aristotle. And one of the key things in that study was psychological safety is the thing that enables high-quality teaming and high-quality teamwork. The thing that cracks me up about that article is they go, we have found the secret to high-performing teams. We have no idea how you create it. Good luck. And I think it's been like that in most of my experiences, right? How many people have been on a high-performing team? How many people have been on a crap team? How many people could have predicted at the outset that that was how it was going to go, right? Sometimes it's really hard. Some of you are like, no, I knew that was going to be crap. Sometimes it's very, very hard to know, is this team that I'm going to be on high performing? You can put a lot of smart people in a room, but a lot of smart people does not a high performing team make. So paying attention to signals like this is really important. And when you hit that threshold, that tipping point between a single team and a team of teams, if I could make one piece of advice after doing many, many different org designs for many different organizations in the Valley, architect your team of teams based on the goals you'd like to achieve for your customers. When you get to this 150 stage, when you get to this point where you're going from a team to a team of teams, it can be really, really tempting to make these decisions based on individual people who are in your organization right now. Oh, this person's really good at X, Y, Z, so we're gonna give them these things. It doesn't really make sense, but like, it'll shake out. Or this person is a really talented people manager. We'll have everyone roll up to them. They don't know anything about marketing, but it'll be fine. Always come back to what it is that you want to achieve for your customer and define your teams based on that. That clarity will give you the ability to execute very quickly within your organization. Which brings us to the second piece of a learning culture, and that is to get relentlessly curious about what your customers need and what they want. And I think this really touches on something we've heard over and over again today, which is we've got to find out what it is that people get or value that people receive from working with us and really capitalize on that. Some things we actually do at Slack. So we have a program. This is my boss, Allie Rail. She's one of the first 8 people to start at Slack and is integral to the company's fabric and DNA. And she runs a program called Everyone Does Support. We have 1,000 people in our company, and every single week, every single one of them answers support requests from people like you. So if you've used Slack, you know that you can just do /feedback in the product, and every single one of those, now you're all gonna do it right now, will be answered by a real human who reads your response and writes back. Oftentimes, it's our engineers who are doing their Everyone Does Support shift. Oftentimes, it's our marketers who are doing their Everyone Does Support shift. And when we first rolled this out, we thought it was going to be smooth sailing. And it wasn't. Because some people said, excuse me, do you know I'm really important? I don't do support. And I said, I'm sorry, you don't do support? You don't talk to our customers and understand what it is that our customers want and need, and that this is actually the most important thing you could spend your time on? And I said, give me one shift. Just give me 1 hour. You give me 1 hour, and if you don't learn anything in that hour, you can honestly tell me that you didn't learn anything in that hour, we're cool. I have never had a single person after that hour tell me that they didn't want to do it again the next week. We have almost 100% participation rates in our Everyone Does Support process. Another strategy, especially if you are building a product that is for perhaps someone that does something slightly different than what you do inside your organization, dog food, dog food, dog food. Right now, I have every beta of Slack in every iteration on every possible device. There are like 4 phones in my backpack. Please don't steal it while I'm up here. With every single beta. And I have probably experienced every single bug. And if you've experienced some bugs, you know it hurts. And it helps us understand the pain points that our customers are experiencing. But there's one caveat that I would tell you. We are a company of 1,000 extremely tech-savvy people. We need to dog food with caution because in many cases, we are actually not our customers. I will never forget the time when someone said like, well, slash commands are so easy. I don't understand why everyone just doesn't use a slash command. I was like, we just rolled out to Liberty Mutual, and they are just figuring out email. Like, they literally were like, yeah, we just figured out these awesome routing things that we're doing. Like, slash commands are like next world to them. It's gobbledygook. They don't even know, when we were rolling out to them, they were like, we don't even understand what this means. We're not coders. So always remember that what is going on in your organization and the feedback that you have about your product isn't always exactly the same as the feedback your customers will have. Your customers are smart, they're amazing, and they're going to do really great things with your product, but make sure that you understand their perspective and where they're coming from. The last piece is thinking very carefully about how we implement change. Like, change in every essence hurts. And it's your job as founder, it's your job as leader of your organization to actually figure out how to manage change in a way that makes people more excited about what you're chasing. And sometimes that can feel like work that doesn't need to be done because you've already in your own mind made the change. You're like, yes, this totally makes sense, but you haven't brought anyone with you. So taking the time to do that change management and to tolerate the need that people will have to process a change is critically important when you're building that learning culture. Because if people feel like things are completely out of their control, the last thing they'll feel is safe, and the last thing they'll be able to do is understand and learn from what happens at work every day. So one of the things we do is we actually create intentional time that happens on a recurring basis to figure out and initiate what we can change. So we call ours a retro, and we do the retro not in reaction to some event. We do the retro every single 2 months because we know that every single 2 months, the number of users we're serving changes substantially, and how we do that will need to change as well. So we're big Trello fans, and we actually do our entire retro right on Trello, and people can vote on things, and we have discussions, and we decide exactly what actions we are going to take to make that change. The thing that's important is, it's not, oh no, this thing is on fire, how are we going to fix it? It's, if we're not changing every 2 months, we're probably already behind. And making sure that everyone on our team believes that and understands that has been incredibly critical to our culture and to our success. So when you have that retro, it is possible that you will come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of things that you could improve. But I am going to encourage you, just as many others who have been up here before me today have said, to be relentlessly intentional about what you choose to change. As a founder, as a leader, you get like maybe one big change a quarter, maybe, and then people are just sort of on overload. So be really careful where you choose to focus, and recognize that people are going to have to go through all of these emotions before they can finally act on that change. So if you're the kind of person that's going to go sit at a conference all day, get 10 new ideas, come back to the office tomorrow and be like, guys, here's what we're doing, pick one thing. And maybe don't do it like the day after you get back from the conference, because then you're gonna be, the CEO that comes back from the conference and has 10 new ideas. Like, do it like Monday. And let people sort of ask you how it went, kind of break it in a little bit, and be really intentional about the changes that you want to create in your organization. So to kind of recap here, there are really 3 key elements that you need to consider when crafting the learning culture of your organization as a founder, especially in a rapidly scaling organization. The first is be explicit about how you work together, and when people violate those norms, make sure that they understand that. Because you can certainly write it all down, but if no one keeps each other accountable, what's the point? So define that. Create user manuals. Create ways of talking about how we work together. The second is make your company endlessly curious and courageous about finding out what customers need. It's everyone's job to know what customers need and to understand exactly where they're coming from. If you can build that into the fabric of your organization's DNA, it will be stronger for it. And the last piece is think really deeply about routines that will automatically prompt people to find changes and improvements, whether that's a retro, whether that's a weekly stand-up, whatever format works for you. Make change the way we do business, not the way we put out fires. The future of work demands this learning culture because people are staying at jobs typically about 18 months. And so this learning culture will ensure that people can get up to speed really quickly, understand how to work with other people on your team and what's expected. It will help prevent turnover because people who are there will hopefully feel very psychologically safe and engaged. And then, of course, most importantly, it will create an environment whereby you are able to execute on your business objectives as a founder and as a leader in an organization that is facing some pretty intense, exciting challenges. So I would ask you right now, after an entire day of listening, you have all been such an amazing audience. Philly is looking really good right now. Take a moment and write down, what is your commitment? Maybe your commitment is something about creating a learning culture. Maybe it's something about being hooked or creating something that what we talked about with designing your product to hook others. Maybe it's something about your strategy or what we heard this morning with pre-games. What is the one thing that you want to take with you and take back to your organization? Just jot that down. All right, I love to see when people take action on their commitments, so if you want to tweet at me later and let me know what those are, I would love to hear them because I think it's really important, and if you share that commitment with someone else, you're at least 30% more likely to take action on it. So when a startup stops learning, it starts dying, and I think that all of you, if you have been here until this very, very end, you are learners by nature, so this should be something that you are inherently predispositioned to do well. You can check out Slack at slack.com, or you can tweet at me at Kristen Swanson. One thing that I would just encourage you all to do as you kind of go forth and you think about what you're doing, like Philly is an amazing, amazing city. I've lived in San Francisco for the last 5 years, but every time I come home to Philly, it reminds me what an amazing, vibrant founder, entrepreneur culture there is here. So like, you make me all proud and like, keep it up. It's so great. I can't wait till I come back home and work at one of your amazing startups. So thank you. Hopefully you got some practical takeaways, but as promised, guaranteed, we are now at happy hour. So thank you for that. Do we have time for Q&A? Yeah, couple of Q&A? Yeah. Yeah, so the 18 months is not specific to Slack. It's like the whole valley right now. Yeah. And one of the things, we actually at Slack have been very lucky that we are able to retain people a little bit longer than that on average, which we're very proud of, but people still do move around quite a lot. And so one of the things that we are very, very, very intentional and careful about is our 90-day onboarding process. So we have to build a lot of processes to help people to ramp up quickly. And to your point, we have to actually also intentionally make information and people redundant so that many people know things. We are very, very careful and relentless about documentation, how things work, code reviews, because we actually expect and plan for people to leave. And it's something that is a problem that I think will only continue because basically people stay, they vest, they do their thing, and then they move on. And so that's something that as an organization and as sort of a culture out there, we're trying to figure out. Great question. Yeah?
Yeah, can you touch on how you implement an employee feedback system and then kind of how that creates an environment for honesty and kind of like a good culture overall?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have a pretty counterintuitive feedback system at Slack. So we are very big on narrative feedback, so we actually do not have a rating or ranking system. Every piece of feedback that we give to our employees is qualitative, and the reason for that is because you are more likely to change future behavior when it is qualitative feedback, not a number. So we actually also, for a long time, had our promotion cycle or our compensation cycle separate from our feedback cycle, because the second we paired, like, you're gonna get $10,000 more with the feedback, people actually didn't hear the feedback. They heard, here's how much money I'm getting or not getting, did you say something else? And so we've been really intentional to make sure that there's continuous feedback all the time that's narrative in nature and completely decoupled from compensation and promotion changes so that people feel excited and engaged to take more action in their day-to-day work. The other thing is we've tried to take the teeth out of feedback. The idea that you're gonna give someone a review once or twice a year is completely out of date. People want feedback often and all the time. So what we actually find is that we actually use a bot on Slack called Captain Feedback. It's a free little bot. And basically it helps people solicit peer feedback from each other and collect them up into a little portfolio that they have as a private channel with their manager, which has helped us kind of keep that culture going. But I would be remiss if I said one of the things I've noticed over the last 3 years in general, not just at Slack, but all over the Valley, the appetite for feedback is very, very high. And so even with all of these programs, when we look at our engagement data, people are still looking for more feedback from both their managers and their peers. So I think there's a lot we need to do to kind of disrupt that space.
What do you think about feedback going up the chain as well?
We do 360s, so every feedback cycle includes anonymized feedback to their manager, as well as feedback from the manager to the employee and across peers. Yeah, great question. Yeah.
I was intrigued by your my style sort of statement.
Uh-huh.
So, but it would seem to me that that might be appropriate for only certain size companies. Like if you're really tiny, a handful of people, it might seem sort of too formal for the three of us to each write our own style sheet for the others to read. And if you're really big, no one would have time to read thousands of statements. So, sort of, what's the sweet spot in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the sweet spot is a deeply bound working team. So probably somewhere between 8 to 10 people is really the sweet spot. There's a lot of value in having that visible for a team of up to 150 where everyone pretty much knows each other but perhaps isn't deeply invested in it. The channel, so we have 170 people in our department now. There's a channel, it has everyone's user manuals in it. So if I have to do a project with someone I haven't worked with in a while or yet, I can actually go like stalk them a little bit, check it out. The thing I would say about doing it with 3 people is you might think you know each other really well, you might be surprised what you learn. And it might feel formal, you could certainly make it less formal than that. We're gonna talk about this today, write these 3 things on a Post-it, and we're gonna have a chat for the first 10 minutes of our team meeting. You certainly don't have to take it to that level of sophistication if it's not right for your team. Great question. Any others? All right, oh, one more.
One more, that 150 number.
Yes.
So that's a pretty big number already. Like, that's just the maximum number you can remember everyone, which I think is a lot out there. Remember that many people?
It seems like 50 or 60 starts to become where it's like, oh, I don't really remember everyone's name all of a sudden, and there's multiple teams and multiple things. Is there a cutoff number to the cultural change?
So when you're 1,000 people, 150 seems quaint, and when you're 10 people, 60 seems really big. So I think that a lot of this, again, as I said, if you are the person on the team, it's really hard to judge this, so get an outside perspective for sure, because it's hard to feel it when you're in it. Yeah. All right.
Good.
I'm good. Are you good? All right.